Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. Friday fun as usual. How you doing, Amber?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I was just saying I feel like a shoe in the dryer this week because of how chaotic it's been, but I am getting it together. You said your week's been pretty good?
Relatively smooth, but we'll see. Fridays are always.
I don't want to shake it up too much.
I know.
We're gonna have some good conversation.
That's right.
And keep it going.
Coming up on Rising, former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted on charges of giving false statements and obstructing a congressional proceeding.
Plus, former President Barack Obama is not holding back, blasting the Trump administration over their claims about Tylenol.
And could Charlie Kirk be featured on American currency? Well, some Republicans are trying to make that happen. But first, Lindsey, what's in your lens today?
Okay, lots to talk about. So during an Oval Office news conference yesterday, current President Trump had a warning for what he called radical left Democrats. He suggested that if the rhetoric and violence continue, the right may eventually respond in kind. Take a look.
The radical left is causing this problem, not the right, the radical left. And it's going to get worse, and ultimately it's going to go back on them.
And then he doubled down. Take a look.
I mean, bad things happen when they play these games. And I'll give you a little clue. The right is a lot tougher than the left. But the right's not doing this. They're not doing it. And they better not get them energized, because it won't be good for the left.
Now, these words weren't delivered at a campaign rally. They came straight from the Oval Office. They landed at a time when America is already on the edge after the deadly shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. According to Axios, our nation has seen more high-profile assassination attempts in the last 14 months than any other point since the murders of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy in the 1960s. That includes 2 attempts on Trump himself, the killing of a Democratic Minnesota lawmaker, and an arson attack on Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's home. Now, in this climate especially, words matter, but instead of de-escalating, President Trump is striking the matches. And the result is predictable. Calls for violence, and there's even been civil war conversations spreading across social media. MAGA influencers are declaring, quote, war on the left, even as Democrats across the board have condemned Kirk's murder. Still, here's Trump again, this time at Charlie Kirk's own memorial service.
He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry.
So that's not good leadership. That's an ego with a microphone. Presidential leadership, real leadership, means calling the nation and calming the nation, not pouring gasoline on a fire that's already burning. It doesn't mean silencing debate, but it does mean drawing a line between disagreement and dehumanization. Because disagreeing with someone's politics is not the same as endorsing their murder. Suggesting otherwise isn't just dishonest, it's dangerous. At the end of the day, presidents set the tone. So when tragedy strikes, the job is simple. Even if it isn't easy, comfort the country, call for unity, and make sure civil discourse survives. Right now, we don't need someone daring Americans to fight one another. We need someone reminding us why democracy is worth fighting for together.
All right, so I would start by saying that I did not like Trump's comments in the Oval Office regarding the insinuation that Republicans would respond in kind with violence to left-wing attacks. I think one of the beautiful things that we've seen in the aftermath of Charlie's death is that we haven't seen a Republican violent response. We've seen prayer vigils, we've seen memorial services, we've seen political donations, political mobilization, and that's where it should stay. I do think the comments made at the memorial service from Trump are a little bit different, where he talked about, I do hate my opponents and I don't want what's best for him. For me, that moment was really about comparing and contrasting himself with Charlie Kirk's Christian message. And he says in the aftermath of those comments, I'm sorry, Erica, maybe you can change my mind. And to me, that was a delineation of Charlie. He's sort of acknowledging that Charlie was a better man and a better Christian than him, and acknowledging how difficult it is not to hate people who disagree with you. So I didn't think that was quite on the same level as what he said in the Oval Office.
And also, I thought that Erica Kirk's speech was so beautiful. Just the moment that she was able to say, forgiving someone who just murdered her husband is something unfathomable, right, even as I was a viewer at home. So I think that it almost took away from what a beautiful moment that was, to have the president of our country with an opportunity to create and foster unity, continue on a message that is not really unifying. And I know he said Erica can teach him some things, and it was maybe in jest, but too many times I think we give President Trump the past of things being in jest or things being, that's just the way he is. You know, he's not your average person. We didn't vote for this uptight politician. But I just know that, in fact, in the past, when we've had extreme tragedy, even most recently in Texas at the ICE facility, immediately he's jumping to figure out who to blame instead of saying this murderer needs to, well, the man unfortunately killed himself, so he can't be brought to justice. But it's like, you know, immediately we shouldn't jump to trying to figure out who to point fingers at. And that happens on both sides of the aisle. But I just wish that also on top of that, we're not escalating, especially making dangerous conversations like you don't want to really get into a brawl or a back-to-back with the right, because we're tougher. Like, we're at the end of the day a nation who all wants the same things, right? We all want freedom, peace for our children, a better life for ourselves. We want the American dream. And I just feel like we're losing a sense of that with how insensitive I think all of us have become with social media and everything, with things just kind of pass in the wind and are not, I don't know. And maybe I'm clutching my pearls too much, but I just feel like that we could do better.
Yeah, look, I want calls for unity. I want the nation to be unified, but one of the things that really troubled me after Charlie's murder, you know, agreeing with a lot of the things that he said and being part of the conservative movement, was learning how many self-identified liberals are willing to justify political violence, whether it was the thousands of TikToks that we saw from people who are in positions of relative authority, like healthcare workers or teachers. And then also hearing ABC News anchors or commentators, rather, saying that Charlie brought him on himself because he was spreading hate. Multiple Democrats refusing to sign on to the resolution in Congress to honor Charlie Kirk, saying, well, we didn't agree with what he said. Well, that shouldn't matter, right? Honoring his life doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that he said. And then the YouGov poll showing, again, a significant percentage of self-identified liberals agreeing with political violence in some circumstances. As someone who sits on the right side of the aisle, to know that so many of my fellow Americans hate me and would celebrate if I was dead is deeply concerning.
For sure. And I think it's right to condemn, or if people want to fire in private companies, people who do things that are egregious across the board. We've talked about that even last week. And I do think that the companies have the right to do that, and people should not be so negative online. That's one of the reasons why X has become a little disturbing to me, because I feel like a lot of people who are not in positions of power still have access to social media, hide behind avatars, and kind of say the worst of things, everything that pops into their head. But I do know that as I tried to scour and find a Democratic leader say anything other than that this was a tragedy. I mean, at the top level, from Newsom to Kamala down to local politicians that were Democratic, they all had to say that this political violence cannot stand in our country. This is un-American, and a similar message. So even though there are people online, we can't control the masses. If you're saying of liberal people online, just like we can't control the masses of people.
I agree that most of them are not Democratic leaders that are outright celebrating, but I have found that the Democratic response has fallen short in a lot of instances. I mean, you had Ilhan Omar smearing this guy and tarnishing his memory, speaking ill of the dead within days after he passed, accusing him of being a racist and a hate monger. There were other Democrats as well who felt the need to speak on his legacy when they were taking out of context or manipulated quotes that weren't even true. To me, that just fuels the fire.
Well, I think that you can think that the way that someone was killed and losing a life is reprehensible, but at the same time, you don't have to change your mind and agree with them because their stances are something you particularly stand by when they were alive. We could have definitely, but I mean, even in Congress, like a lot of those Congress people said
that they're condemning.
Well, a lot of people in Congress said they do want to push a bill forward to stop political violence. They don't think it needs to be in Charlie Kirk's name, and that has to be a comfortable conversation to have at this point because it's our government, and it doesn't have to be, but it can be. And some people proposed that, and others said, no, let's just make a bill about political violence. So I don't think that Democrats were not on board for that.
Well, I mean, he was the one who was assassinated, though. So to be like, well, we're not.
But we should do it in the Minnesota lawmakers' name as well. That's what I mean. There's a lot of people we could do it in their name.
I know.
We can do it in all.
A lot of people bring up the Hortman thing, and look, I understand that was a tragedy, and Republicans across the board condemned it. I mean, the Mike Lee joke, I think we both agree, should and was condemned by basically everybody. But the reality is, no one knew who they were before they were killed. And so trying to elevate them to the level of Charlie Kirk to say, like,
wait, having a position that's actually a congressional position versus someone who's outside of Congress who just had influence, somebody should be held at a higher regard than the other person when they pass?
My point is that the Democrats are often bring that case up as they're supposed to have the same level of influence that Charlie did, or that the same number of people who knew them. It's a tragedy nonetheless, but it's not the same.
But even with Gabrielle Gifford, right, we could have put it in her name. There's so many instances where we have an opportunity to put it in everyone's name who was a victim of political violence. And some people just said maybe not only Charlie Kirk, and that conversation it shouldn't offend people. It should just be open to dialogue and wanting to solve the issue of political violence, no matter what it's called.
It just seems to me like a rather weird thing to get hung up about, is that it's in Charlie's name when he was the person who was assassinated. That's all I'm saying.
We'll talk about it a lot more. Former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted. His response coming up. We'll be right back. Former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted by a federal grand jury. You may remember Comey's tenure at the head of the Bureau coincided with the beginning of Trump's first term and the 2016 investigation into whether Trump's first campaign colluded with Russia to win the presidency. That investigation drew the ire of Trump, who fired Comey in 2017.
Comey has been charged with giving false statements and obstruction of a congressional proceeding, both connected to testimony he gave to the Senate Judiciary Committee back in September of 2020. If convicted, Comey could face as much as 5 years in prison. In response to the indictment, Trump posted to Truth Social, quote, "Justice in America. One of the worst human beings this country has ever been exposed to is James Comey, the former corrupt head of the FBI. Today, he was indicted by a grand jury on 2 felony counts for various illegal and unlawful acts. He has been so bad for our country for so long and is now at the beginning of being held responsible for his crimes against our nation."
Comey, for his part, responded with a video posted to Instagram. Let's take a listen.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way. We will not live on our knees. My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial and keep the faith.
Now, this all comes just days after the president fired Eric Siebert, the then U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, for failing to bring charges against another of Trump's longtime political rivals, New York Attorney General Letitia James. Trump then urged Attorney General Pam Bondi in a Truth Social post to prosecute Comey and James, along with Senator Adam Schiff, who led Trump's first impeachment in the House.
In an unusual twist, Joy Behar, co-host of The View, says that she actually agrees with Trump's disdain for Comey, but for a different reason. Take a listen.
I don't like Comey. I agree with Trump on this one.
You don't like Comey because of what he
I don't like what he did to Hillary.
Joy.
I don't like what he did to Hillary.
So therefore he should be prosecuted?
No.
But
I rarely have something that I agree with Trump on. So this is one thing.
But you don't like him.
But Joy, some would say he was doing his job, James Comey.
What, at the last minute to bring out this baloney, email baloney thing?
Some
Get
would
out
say
of
he
here.
was doing.
I think the key there is that she said, I don't like him. And President Trump says, I don't like him, but we need to go to the furthest extent of the law. And law should not be wrapped and intermingled with personal feelings. Like, there's a little bit of very obvious political retribution here. And I think that the Justice Department is meant to be apolitical and is structured that way so that our entire country doesn't lose faith in how it's supposed to operate. And when you think about Trump's political enemies and even the Truth Social message that he sent to Pam Bondi, that people were trying to figure out if it was supposed to be a direct message to her directly or if it was meant for the world to see, was very much a pressure, like, do something. And he's had several people say they don't want to do this. They don't think this is a good idea. And a lot of prosecutors saying, I don't know how far this is going to go as far as, like, actually proving that this man is guilty and should be in jail for 5 years.
Yeah, the mainstream media reports when Eric Siebert was pushed out of the job and replaced by Lindsey suggested that this was a rushed investigation, that it was sort of thrown together haphazardly, and that the attorneys in Siebert's office did not believe that there was enough evidence. But Catherine Herridge, formerly of CBS, now Independent, reports that there actually was a quite long investigation, that the case was ready to go as soon as the attorney turned over. Siebert was apparently blocking the prosecution. And of course, they presented these materials to a grand jury, which very quickly indicted James Comey, because there is really quite a lot of evidence that he did lie to Congress. One of the most important pieces of evidence is that in his testimony, he claimed that he never authorized media leaks from the FBI. But when his deputy, Andy McCabe, testified later, he said that Comey directed him personally to leak things to the media. So obviously one of them wasn't telling the truth. It was either James Comey or Andy McCabe.
Yeah, I think when we look at the series of events, because you said, like, you know, Siebert didn't want to move forward with it, but now we have an inexperienced prosecutor who hasn't done cases like this in the position that he was just in, who has been in the job for less than a week, who was a Trump ally, who's like, let's move forward. So you're saying mainstream media is kind of consuming it and reporting it this way. Those are some of the facts that happened, is that somebody came in, immediately action was taken, several other people said this wasn't a good idea, and then now we're off to the races.
Yeah, my point was that they claimed that this was based on shoddy evidence or a rushed investigation, but really that portion of it had been going on for a long time. It was just that Siebert didn't want to ultimately pull the trigger to seek that indictment.
So the New York Times was saying that when they looked at the indictment, it's kind of bare bones. They said, you know, obstructing Congress, it was a little bit of a vague charge, and, you know, saying that Comey lied is going to be really hard to, and they weren't given an opinion. They were kind of talking to prosecutors and analyzing, like, proving that and moving forward, how much he actually knew when he was under oath beforehand and then after. So it's just like, is this worth the time, effort, and money for the same administration that was so frustrated that they felt that they were always politically prosecuted and went on an entire campaign season as the victim, President Trump, saying that he's always on the brunt of or receiving end of political persecution, to then turn around and do this and make it a point to try to do this to all your enemies, including most recently trying to get Letitia James. It's just like, there has to be a better use of our time, resources, and money.
You know, James Comey, I think, is being held to the same standard that he held other people to when he was at the FBI, because he infamously said about Martha Stewart in regards to her perjury charges related to alleged insider trading, that she needed to be made an example of, and that if people thought that they could just lie to government officials and get away with it, then that would set a bad precedent and other people would do it, and we would basically have chaos. So we've got to throw the book at Martha Stewart. So I feel like if that's his position on lying to government officials, it's not a stray from me. It's
I'm saying from him.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's like,
well, and I think he was the prosecutor on the case. I'm sure someone will fact check me in the comments, but I know he was deeply involved. So, I mean, if that's his standard, then I guess he's just being held to the same one.
You know what? The thing is, like, the ping pong will endlessly go back and forth. And, like, say we get a Democratic president. My concern is that we continuously do this. And then let's say they match the pettiness and they're like, okay, well, I'm going after any. Some of them might have validity. Some things might not. Even with the big thing of trying to relitigate and see if you could litigate a president, former President Obama, regarding Russia. It was like, are we seriously going back 2 presidents ago to try to figure out? It's just exhausting. Like, are we really going to try to do this? And I know you feel strongly about Russia. We don't have time to get into it.
I know.
But I just feel like, is that how we want to spend the next decade? Is that the change that we thought that President Trump was going to bring?
If we could have mutual disarmament and the Democrats would agree not to prosecute their political opponents, I think Republicans would respond in kind.
Well, Republicans have a new tactic to push a funding deal through. That's why Democrats are saying they won't be intimidated after the break. We're going to talk about it. Don't go anywhere. So the White House is warning of more mass firings if a funding deal isn't reached by the end of the month.
The Office of Management and Budget sending out this memo to agencies, telling them to prepare to downsize their workforce, but also stating if a funding deal is passed, then this won't be necessary.
Now, Democrats, of course, are firing back on these threats. Here's what House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries had to say.
We will not be intimidated by Russ Vought, who's completely and totally out of control. The OMB has been illegally shutting down parts of the government throughout the entire year. And the notion that Democrats are going to be intimidated by this guy, when all he's done is send a message to voters in Virginia and across the country that Republicans are determined to hurt the American people.
And Senate Minority Leader Schumer posting this on X, saying this is an attempt at intimidation, that this is nothing new. The president has been firing workers all year as a scare tactic. Also, that any firings will be stopping in court or their workers will be rehired like we've seen in the past.
President Trump and Republicans have been firm on blaming Democrats for a potential shutdown. Here's what the president had to say.
This is all caused by the Democrats. They asked us to do something that's totally unreasonable. They never change. They want to give money away to illegally, people that entered our country illegally. They want to give them massive federal money.
I remember reading a study earlier this year that, I don't know if it still stands, or last year, that it was the most ineffective Congress we've seen in decades. Robbie and I agree about this, one thing, but I'm just like, the fact that, I think that the government shutting down is just an overall failure of people to do their jobs that are in those positions. Like furloughing people for weeks or months, putting people out of work, not being able to come up with a game plan to actually fund the things that are necessary to keep our country running smoothly, but on the back end, not even be able to have a conversation. So I know that Democrats and President Trump were supposed to meet earlier this week to have a conversation. And then Trump said he read something that they said and just said, cancel it, it's too much, which is also not a great, when you're negotiating, as he knows, as he sits across the table from people and leaders like Russia and Putin, like, you don't just throw what you want at the table. There's a conversation that happens. He's the great negotiator, right? So he ran on that. Why can't he come to the table and have a dialogue? Part of it will be his fault if this shuts down, since he didn't even come to the table. And so I just think that if they all allow this to go through and making this new threat is not helpful. People's jobs are actually on the line. Livelihoods are on the line. And I even interviewed earlier this year a Trump voter that worked for the federal government that was let go under Doge, just the mass firings then. And he was like, this is not what I was a stellar employee. It doesn't make any sense. Like, people are actually affected by these games that Congress are playing.
Yeah, so I'll start with a point of agreement, which is that Congress is ineffective. And
okay, so all three of us agree.
Yeah, I mean, the constant last-minute spending bills is like incredibly frustrating. It's every time. I thought they should have done the full spending bill back in the spring when they did the CR instead. But, I'm not in Congress, so whatever. Who cares what I think? All that being said, I do think part of the negotiation is sometimes being willing to walk away from the table when the demands that you're being asked for are unreasonable, which I think the Democrats are. Look, obviously it takes 60 votes in the Senate to pass this spending bill. Republicans have 53 votes. So Democrats will take the blame for this. They're minority party, and they're asking for really unreasonable things like bringing back funding for healthcare for illegal immigrants, bringing back spending on transgender surgeries. The American people don't want either of those two things if you poll them and ask. And then 3, they want to extend the Obamacare subsidies. Well, if Obamacare is so great and is going to lower health costs, then why do we need these massive subsidies? Well, surprise, surprise, because it actually increased premiums.
Well, I also think when you have like the big, beautiful bill that just passed, that's going to ultimately cut care for people that are underprivileged throughout our country. And even Senator Josh Hawley, who's a Republican, said this is not a good idea for Republicans to do because people that are on Medicaid and Medicare are not only Democrats. We're in a situation where Democrats in Congress were considering ways to extend Affordable Care Act and other things that will expire later this year to make sure they're protected. So I think it's going to be a back and forth until they figure this out. It's an important issue.
All right, Trump signing an executive order yesterday agreeing to a proposed deal to buy TikTok. We'll break down the details. Stick around.
President Trump has signed an executive order essentially pre-approving a proposed deal to move TikTok under U.S. ownership. The president signed the order Thursday, indicating he would allow TikTok to continue operating in the U.S. and will enable a group of American investors to buy the app from its current Chinese-owned parent company, ByteDance.
That group of investors who are set to buy the majority stake is reportedly led by Larry Ellison, a Trump ally and CTO of tech giant Oracle. The deal is not finalized. It does still need Chinese approval, but Trump indicated yesterday that Xi Jinping is on board.
I spoke with President Xi. We had a good talk. I told him what we were doing, and he said, go ahead with it. Great respect for President Xi, and I very much appreciate that he approved the deal, because to get it done properly, we really needed the support of China and the approval of China. I thought President Xi was great in terms of his approval. We probably could have done it a different way, but it wouldn't have been the same. Wouldn't have been the same security at all, but I appreciated that he approved it.
The deal does reportedly keep a minority stake of the company in Chinese control, which seemingly contradicted the conditions laid out in the ban passed by Congress last year. That ban, which was signed by then-President Joe Biden, outlined that TikTok could only continue operating in the U.S. if it sold all of its assets to an American company. But Trump, in the order, declared that while the proposed deal isn't exactly what the law required, it meets the security concerns laid out in the law.
But some on the right disagree. According to the Financial Times, a U.S. advisor close to the deal called it, quote, the ultimate taco trade. You guys know this taco thing kills me every time. Referring to the acronym Trump always chickens out. The source lamented to the FT, quote, after all this, China keeps the algorithm. And Mark Short, former director of legislative affairs in Trump's first administration, writes an op-ed on Fox News, quote, the proposal would allow ByteDance to retain a board seat while leasing its algorithm to a group of American investors. This may sound like a compromise, but it's in fact a capitulation. Licensing is not ownership and monitoring is not control. As long as ByteDance retains the ability to alter the algorithm from Beijing, the CCP will preserve one of its most powerful tools for influencing American minds and waging psychological warfare against the West. I'm glad that we had that in our read-in, because that's the thing. And I know that Biden first proposed this, but Trump, kind of laid the law down moving forward with this idea, and they needed TikTok to sell the app. That was the agreement. And so the taco thing is funny, but it is like, yeah, you lead in with an iron fist, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, you could lease. So they're not outright selling it. They're leasing, the technology to U.S. entity, which will be the new company operating under all the people that you named in the intro that are Trump's allies. So I can get into the reasons why I'm concerned about his friends owning this or partially owning this app. But I just think in terms of the deal, people need to understand the U.S. doesn't own TikTok now at all.
Yeah, I would like the deal to be more in line with the legislation, which is full American ownership. I do think some of the early reports about the algorithm were slightly misleading. According to what I was looking at this morning for the preliminary deal, obviously it's not finalized, it's that the American companies actually get to basically wipe and retrain the algorithm to get rid of all of that past CCP influence, and then moderation decisions will be made in concert with all of the people on the board, which includes that one ByteDance seat. So it's not as much of a red flag as I initially thought reading some of these pieces, but I would still prefer, of course, 100% American ownership and moderation.
And now talking about the ownership, that's the more concerning part than the Chinese people owning the app. It's the fact that, we have Andreessen Horowitz, I believe, that's one of Trump's friends, the Oracle owner, Mike Dell, who owns Dell, who's a Trump associate for years. These are all people that are reportedly going in to buy the software or the company that will house the software. And to me, when you think about it, if they're programming the algorithm, and we saw what very obviously Elon Musk did to Twitter, which is a different place now that it's X. We can agree on that it changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's better.
Fine. So that's a thought. But I just TikTok was a fun, really young and youthful place, and I feel like it's going to become propaganda for President Trump and his friends. And the reason why I say that is because we're seeing a series of events that make me, as somebody in the media industry, extremely uncomfortable when you talk about freedom of the press and the freedom of the way that we express ourselves. And I think when the President Trump is suing the New York Times, then that's getting pushed to the side because it doesn't have enough detail in it that a jury can understand. When President Trump is putting friends at CBS in positions to be the neutral moderator, that somebody who actually was his ambassador in the past in positions at CBS to look through the news and make sure it's all right-leaning at this point.
Trump didn't put that person in CBS.
Yes, but it's coming from after a lawsuit. That's like, okay, well, you did me a favor. And when he's involved in so much, when the FCC is jumping in about what should happen, and maybe indirectly, but still jumping in, Brendan Carr about at ABC. There's just a lot going on to me that makes it like every single outlet now has the touch of President Trump somewhere on it, and that's not I don't think we want to live in a state-run media America.
I think the important thing to remember about these big tech companies is that ultimately at the end of the day, what matters to them is not politics, it's money. And so if an algorithm that is tailored solely to promoting the MAGA agenda were put on TikTok, I don't think that app would be very successful because people like that app. Because
that basically is X right now.
No, it's not.
To me, I think that it completely just X has turned into just mostly right-wing information, and
Midas
sometimes
Touch is one of the biggest accounts on X.
Yeah, if you have one example of something, doesn't mean that it's the norm.
There's a lot of examples. Brooklyn Dad, the Krasenstein brothers, the Midas Touch, JoJo from Jurors, like all of these Democratic influencers are doing amazingly on X. one of the reasons why conservative content is more prolific on X is because a lot of the liberals left and went to Blue Sky. That's a personal choice.
Got it. Well, I guess we're going to have to make more competition or more apps that are just neutral. I think when people talk about award shows, they don't want politics involved. And so when people used to use social media, I mean, politics can be there, but everything turned political now. And so sometimes it gets exhausting because you try to find ways to consume information, but everything gets political. And I think when you're talking about who's running an app, it's important to look at that, whether it's China or whether it's all of Trump's friends, to make sure that little things aren't in there, especially in the age where misinformation is running rampant. And I don't think that, we should try to find a government way to stop it. We should try to figure out the best way to move forward, because this is the wild, wild west of social media. But when it's that open and then there's all these leaders that are right-leaning running it, it's concerning to me about what information we will and won't get or won't get
promoted. A lot of these big tech leaders are not even really Republicans. I wouldn't even really call them conservative. The reason that they're friendly with the Trump administration is because they felt like they were being over-regulated by the Democrats. So a lot of these people are actually former liberals who would have been happy to be Democrats for the rest of their lives if they weren't facing people like Elizabeth Warren and so much of the left, who not only wanted to overly regulate or break up their companies, but also wanted to enforce a censorship regime on them, like the Biden administration did, with having people at the DHS constantly sending emails to X and Facebook and all of these other companies demanding that they take down what they deemed misinformation. So that was a major threat to free speech to me. And again, going back to this idea that TikTok will not be successful if it's just a political propaganda tool. I mean, look at Truth Social, right? I would say that's a more apt comparison than X in terms of an app that is almost exclusively right-leaning. And the only reason Truth Social does well is because the president posts exclusively on there. So if they tried to do that with TikTok, it would fall apart very quickly. I promise you, Larry Ellison and Mark Andreessen are not sitting there thinking that they want to have an app that is not doing mega numbers, and I wouldn't expect it to change all that much, with the exception of the CCP gets far less control over trying to stoke social division, which is one of the reasons why they really desperately want control of that algorithm.
Well, I hope you're right, because I still want to do those dances, which I will be getting you in on, so we can do them
never.
together.
I will never.
We can do the dances together.
There will be no dancing from Amber.
Okay, guys, a former president firing back on Trump's Tylenol claims, what he said after the break. Stay with us. Former President Obama firing back on Trump's Tylenol claims that they're connected to autism. During a London tour, the former president saying this.
So we had the spectacle of my successor in the Oval Office making broad claims around certain drugs and autism that have been continuously disproved. A lot of what is being trumpeted as these massive increases actually have to do with a broadening of the criteria across that spectrum so that people can actually get services and help, not to, it's all of that is violence against the truth.
So you heard him there saying that basically President Trump was making a spectacle of his successor in the Oval Office and making broad claims around certain drugs. So I think a lot of we should go, I don't want to read the same quote that he just said, right? So let's keep going. Yep. Okay, so go ahead, Amber.
Thank you. Top health officials joining Trump this week to warn against the use of Tylenol, saying that pregnant women should limit their use of the pain reliever acetaminophen, claiming risks for autism. I think I said it better than Trump did. This causing health officials to push back on those claims. Tylenol has been considered one of the safe pain relievers for pregnant women. Vice President Vance sat down with News Nation, saying the president's remarks are warning of potential side effects and that women should trust their doctors.
And Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, also a physician, posting on X saying, I understand and applaud President Trump's desire to address this issue and to support HHS. HHS should release the new data that it has to support this claim. The preponderance of evidence shows that this is not the case. The concern is that women will be left with no options to manage pain in pregnancy. We must be compassionate to this problem.
All right, so one of the things that we did not see in that Obama clip, which I thought was very interesting, is that he described what Trump was doing as a violent attack on the truth.
Yes, he did. Yeah, I talked about that in my lens yesterday. So I can say when it's dramatic wording. I don't know that it's dramatic wording. And I think one thing that stuck out to me about what President Trump said when he and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. were together was that a lot of times moms' thoughts are dismissed when it comes to autism and what may have caused it. A lot of people kind of like say, okay, this is not proven. So I don't think that it's not worth researching. I don't think that it's worth a president getting in front of the entire country and making as firm of statements as he did. He got up there and was like, do not take Tylenol by any means. Like, and I'm paraphrasing, but his words were very strong. The way he said it was very strong. And as a mom, I was told to take Tylenol. I get migraines maybe once a month, and I get, every once in a while I'll get a really bad one that might cause a fever. And that's when you don't want to take that, because that can also you do want to take it because that can cause birth defects, and your doctor has to guide you in this. And even Dr. Oz was on TMZ yesterday, and he's like, talk to your doctor about this. We're just putting the information out there so you know. But I think it has to be concrete information, because what you can do is cause moms to feel that they maybe are the reason that their kid has autism because they decided to take Tylenol, or maybe because they didn't, they cause other issues and they're just making their own health decisions. And I don't think we want to go down that rabbit hole where mothers, especially in this exciting time in their life, are experiencing fear of not knowing what to do because they're conflicted between what doctors are actually still saying, which is that Tylenol used sparingly is still okay, and President Trump saying, please don't do it at all.
I think what Trump said was too far and too firm in comparison to what the White House actually released in terms of the new guidance, which is basically they're putting a new warning label on Tylenol for pregnant mothers and also asking doctors to only prescribe the lowest effective dose for the shortest period of time in order to treat pain, fevers, other symptoms that could lead to birth complications. And that was reiterated by RFK, Dr. Oz, Dr. Marty Makary, and Dr. Jay Bhattacharya during that press conference after Trump spoke. So, the most charitable interpretation of Trump's comments was he was saying, like, why risk it? But I do think saying, don't take it, just don't take it, was not consistent with what the rest of his health advisors were actually saying in that press conference. In regards to the evidence and the data, this is where I take great issue with Obama's comments, particularly the violent attack on the truth as he described it. There are a lot of studies that suggest or claim that there is some kind of connection between Tylenol and increased rates of autism and ADHD, including the Harvard School of Public Health, which did a review of 46 previous studies involving 100,000 patients that confirmed that connection, as well as Mount Sinai, Johns Hopkins University, and some women's health studies. So this is not obviously coming out of nowhere. There was a review of the previous evidence that was done, and they are also doing a further investigation of this connection as well as potentially other linkages to autism. One of the important things in this press conference as well that was really not covered by the media or undercovered because of the freak out over Tylenol was that they discovered this cheap drug can also be, and I apologize, I don't recall the name, it's in the White House report, but this drug can be used to treat one of the drivers of autism, or one of the symptoms, which is there's basically a receptor in the brain that's not receiving certain, I don't know what the term is.
We're not doctors, but I think everybody understands.
Basically, it inhibits the flow of this, whatever it is, to the brain more easily. And in children with autism who have verbal development issues, 60% of them saw an improvement when taking this drug. So that was a really, I think, big breakthrough for parents with kids who are nonverbal, to be able to have something new that they can try to see if it helps them with this obviously really difficult thing that they're dealing with.
And unfortunately, I think that's part of the media game is, right, what's going to get ratings, pull the best sound bites. President Trump did make the decision to make very bold statements, but at the same time, there was a lot there that we could listen to, and doctors in the room that we could listen to even more than the president when it comes to that type of advice. But the thing that concerned me was that the co-author of the study, of that Harvard study that you're talking about, that reviewed all that material, said, quote, "I'm a little concerned about how this message is going to come because I think they may be jumping the gun." Her name is Ann Bauer. She said, "I think that those of us in the research community would like to see stronger evidence." So it's not that there's not any connections. It's just that right now there are more studies that don't directly link that, and it doesn't conclusively say that, than there are ones that are showing any type of connection. And so I think when you come forward and people take only what the president says, because let's be honest, when you have the president on television, people are tuned in more than when you have the rest of the meetings, then that's the average American that might be pregnant, or perhaps that doesn't have time to read through the whole White House briefing like you did, and they're just seeing that in all the headlines, the president said, don't take Tylenol. And I think that that is just where we are. Sometimes social media clips out sound bites, and so we would just want the president to be well-informed if he's going to speak on it as these doctors that were next to him.
Yeah, there's also the problem of people just doing the opposite of what Trump says because they don't like him. There were an unfortunate number of people on TikTok who were displaying their pregnant bellies and then just popping Tylenol into their mouth and doing it as like a
I don't
trend.
spend that much time on TikTok, but that's crazy.
I know, it was insane. And it's like, do you think you're owning Trump by potentially harming your baby? Like, I don't understand what your goal is here. Really, really bizarre stuff. I truly, I don't use Trump derangement syndrome often, but that's like Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Absolutely wild. There was one other thing I wanted to mention in regards to this news conference and the potential link between Tylenol and autism, which I can't remember what it is. So I'll let you go, Lindsey.
Well, I just think that the biggest thing for me is like the empathy part of it. So, when I'm just thinking about other mothers and even the TikTok, I think that's ridiculous. And the reaction to Trump doesn't always have to be that dramatic. But just being well informed, I remember how scary that time was. There's a legitimate fear that happens to me, specifically because for me as a Black woman, when I saw like Serena Williams say, oh my God, this opportunity to maybe not be properly cared for, there's so much going on in your mind as a woman having a baby. And I think that you don't want to add any additions to that. And I remember now thinking, I'm like, should I call my doctor who was recommending, as someone who gets headaches, to take Tylenol, who gets, fevers, to take Tylenol, and not kind of being upset, but I just want the link to make sense. Like, please research it. Please find out and give us hardcore evidence. But if you don't cause panic. And a mom right now is being recommended Tylenol and now confused. Yeah. At this moment, I'm sure there's at least one that's like, her doctor said what my doctor told me,
I'm sure.
And not knowing what to do.
I'm sure. It is a confusing time. And I think having, an abundance of caution until the connection is confirmed or there's more evidence is probably the right tack to take. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the drug maker that owns Tylenol apparently spun it off into a separate company in 2017.
I know that.
As they were facing a lawsuit for this exact thing, for alleged connection to rising autism rates.
Robbie brought up that tweet. They wrote, we wouldn't recommend pregnant women.
Oh, no. What I'm talking about is separate, though.
Oh, something
from the
different.
Tweet.
Okay.
No, the drug company who owns Tylenol, they spun Tylenol off into a separate company amid a lawsuit over the connection to autism.
Well, that's definitely, if
Big
it's worth
Pharma
looking
doing
into
Big
it,
Pharma
look
things,
into
right?
it. Look into it. I just want to be sure. I'm not definitely rounding
I'm just saying that's sketchy.
Okay,
All
guys,
right.
Tylenol it is. Or isn't.
Or isn't. Republicans are looking for ways to honor Charlie Kirk in the wake of his assassination, and 2 lawmakers have a unique proposal. We'll talk about that after a quick break.
A pair of Republican lawmakers are moving to put the face of Charlie Kirk on U.S. currency. They want the U.S. Treasury to mint 400,000 silver dollar coins with Kirk's likeness on it next year.
The effort is being led by Congressman August Pfluger and Abe Hamada. In a statement, Representative Pfluger says Charlie Kirk was a conservative titan whose transformational impact on millions of Americans deserves permanent recognition alongside our nation's greatest leaders and influential figures. The statement continues, this commemorative coin will make Charlie the youngest American ever immortalized on legal U.S. currency, a fitting honor that cements his extraordinary legacy alongside presidents and founding fathers who shaped our republic.
The bill's chances of being passed are uncertain, but it's worth noting that the Treasury does not need congressional approval to place images or likenesses of people on currency. Fox News reports that the coins would have Kirk's face on one side and a Bible quote on the other side. The final design of the coin would be decided by the Treasury in coordination with President Trump.
All right, so what do you think about this, Lindsey?
Listen, let me just start with the fact that Charlie Kirk's death was a tragedy. I understand the impact that he had. He did something that most people have a trouble doing, is galvanizing the youth vote. I think that that's worth being noted and notable. I also think this is like extreme. You just mentioned in the read-in that presidents are on our currency and people that were in political power that changed the trajectory of our country in a political position. And Charlie Kirk, by choice, I'm assuming, because he probably could have ran and won, was not. And so I just want to like make sure that we are, because there are like, I mean, MLK is not on a coin, and these people, it's like.
I thought they did have an MLK silver dollar.
Do we? I don't.
There's also a Sacagawea one. I think Charlie Kirk is more important than Sacagawea.
Wait, why? I didn't. First of all, I didn't know that anybody uses silver coins, so I'm not even gonna lie. Like this story is like
it's more of a commemorative.
It's just a commemorative. But $400,000 sounds like a lot. Like, is his family gonna receive any of the benefits of this? Is there like where does this money go? It just goes. You're printing the
into circulation.
Into circulation,
Yeah.
but that's what I mean. It's like almost you're profiting off of this massive base, right? Millions of followers that he had to put it in commemoration. Like, does his family even want that, or are we just proposing random stuff? Like,
well, the government doesn't profit off of printing money.
I understand, but do they want that? Like, say it's still your likeness, right? He's a private citizen or was a private citizen. So now his face is on a coin. Do they want that? His likeness is being used. He's a private citizen, not in government didn't ask to be honored in this way. So it's just like taking liberties also that perhaps maybe in consideration his family didn't want or need at this time. Maybe his wife wants to continue his legacy in a different way. I mean, I think it's worth a conversation rather than just proposing random bills about how we can make a day and how we can, it's just like, okay, all right.
Yeah, well, let's also not assume that his family didn't provide their approval, right? We don't know that. We don't have those details. I think, looking at, again, some of the other people who have been put on silver dollars, I don't see why it's such a big deal. It's a commemorative coin. There's also Challenger coins that have all sorts of things on them. We have commemorative stamps. Maybe a stamp would be more amenable to you. We have William F. Buckley.
I don't mind a stamp.
Right?
I don't mind a stamp.
Yeah, we've got William F. Buckley on the recent iteration of stamps from the U.S. Postal Service, as well as plenty of other political figures. I think they also put Keith Haring, the famous artist, on there.
Yes, I love Keith Haring.
Yeah, so there you go.
Okay, well, listen, you opened my mind to how many different options there are for people that are just in commemoration.
Yeah.
I think
it's not like he's going to be a permanent fixture on the coin, right? They're printing a limited amount for people to collect, or, I'm sure people will use them, but typically these are for things like coin collectors or people who supported Charlie or like Charlie who want to have this coin to be able to hang on to it and have it as a commemoration.
So in your opinion, basically anybody with outrage over this is just doing theatrics because it's not actually anything that hasn't been done multiple times in the past.
That's right. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Okay, so that was my biggest clarification. I'm thinking like we're going to be seeing these things in circulation the rest of our lives. And it's not that I don't have a problem with Charlie Kirk or his family. I actually just am trying to understand how often this happens and why.
Yeah.
It's
not like they're replacing Abe Lincoln.
But the biggest issue for me is like, and I know we talked about the Minnesota lawmakers, Hortman, that was killed in political violence. Like, the flags weren't even half staffed for her, and she worked in politics. So we're setting precedents for Charlie Kirk, and I hope that we continue this. It's not that I don't think it should be done for him. It's that I hope it's done in the future, and we avoid having incidents like this. But I hope that it's done in the same way for people that are significant to others.
All right, that's going to do it for us on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Have a good weekend.